In 1630, a group of 700 Puritan Christians set out on a ship called the Arbella to settle what today we know of as Massachusetts, but the Massachusetts Bay Colony and especially the city of Boston. Before they set out, someone, it's attributed to John Winthrop, the governor, although it's more likely it was one of the ministers on the ship, someone preached a sermon that today we know of as the City Upon a Hill sermon that has become deeply important to American self-identity, how we think of ourselves as a people. And that sermon went in two parts. The first part was an encouragement to love each other. Puritans, as much as we might disagree with them on certain theological things, very Christian. And they understand that the two laws of Jesus are love God and love neighbor. And so Winthrop, or whoever preached this sermon, talked a lot about love of neighbor as the foundation for the new colony. Both because that was their religious identity, but also because he understood that the colony would only be successful if it was defined by love of neighbor. I think in the back of this preacher's head, they might have had this passage from Isaiah and many other passages like it. Isaiah is talking about love of neighbor, specifically the corporal works of mercy, sharing bread with the hungry, sheltering the homeless and the oppressed, clothing the naked. But there's a result to that. It's not just do it because God told you to. It's if you do this, then you shall call, and the Lord will answer. You shall cry for help, and he will say, Here I am. If you remove from your midst oppression, false accusation, and malicious speech, if you bestow your bread on the hungry and satisfy the afflicted, then light shall rise for you in the darkness, and the gloom shall become for you like midday. The Puritans, these Puritan settlers, understood very deeply that their success was going to depend on their fidelity to God. They understood the biblical narrative. When Israel was faithful to God, things went well for Israel. When Israel was unfaithful to God, things did not go well for Israel. And Winthrop, or the preacher, they believed deeply that God would treat them like he treated Israel. If they were faithful to God in their new undertaking, then things would go well. And if they were unfaithful to God, things would go poorly. Now, the second part of the sermon, the part that we all remember if you studied this in American history class, the part that's been quoted by presidents and other leading American figures, is the city on the hill portion. That's our gospel today. Jesus tells us we're a city on the hill. And this preacher said that this colony was going to be a city on a hill. What they meant was this. The Puritans believed that they were unable to live the faith authentically. First and foremost, it was those dirty, terrible, perfidious Catholics that were preventing them from living the faith. How dare they? But then, in 1630, England was a Protestant country, but the crown went back and forth between high church Anglicanism and low church, more Lutheran or Puritan Protestantism. And England was going through a period in this time of the high church, and the Puritans were sort of the scapegoat, and they were being persecuted. And so this group on the Arbella decided that they needed to go to the New World to try to live the faith purely. This was their chance to start over and say, we know what Christianity is supposed to be. None of these mean Catholics or mean kings are letting us live the faith. We're going to go and we're going to live it in the New World. But they were hyper aware that their success or failure was going to be watched by the entire world. That they had a hypothesis. We have not been able to live Christianity truly and faithfully. Their hypothesis was we go to the New World, we can finally do it. If they succeed, then their hypothesis will be true. If they succeed, if they live Christianity purely with love of God and love of neighbor, then they will prove that Puritanism is true, they will prove that Christianity is true, they will prove that it's possible. If they fail, then the world will look at them and say, well, Puritanism is a failed experiment. And so they were self-aware that not just their own souls, but in their sense, the souls of the entire world depended on their fidelity to God. If they were faithful to God, if they succeeded in their endeavor, then the entire world would be saved. Again, according to their estimation, because they thought the Catholics were terrible people. But, as Catholics, we can say, okay, we'll accept what's good, we'll reject what's bad, whatever. All of it is to say, they were hyper-aware that their efforts mattered not just to them, but to the whole world. Americans since then have continued that idea. Generally, this idea is applied to the experiment in democracy. We were also the first true democratic republic in the world, and we continue to be the oldest one still in existence. So our experiment in democracy is a city on the hill. And if we succeed in maintaining our democracy, and that requires citizenship that means more than just checking a box on a ballot. It means engagement in society. It means trying to support and uphold our local civic institutions, our democratic institutions. If we succeed in democracy, then democracy might spread to the rest of the world. Whereas if we fail, the eyes of the world are upon us, and they will say, well, democracy is a failure, it is not possible, and democracy will be lost for another millennium or two. As Catholics and as Catholic Americans, I think it would be good for us to have the same existential fervor as these early generations of Americans. Both their existential fervor for the experiment in religious liberty. Well, for the Puritans it was everybody has to be Puritan. But in Pennsylvania, the experiment in religious liberty, or the experiment in democracy, we should have that same zeal for our faith. We should know and understand, because of what Jesus says in the gospel about being a city on a hill, that our faith affects not only our souls, but the souls of the entire world. That people are looking upon us to be a light. And if that light goes out, then that light is going to be gone for a very long time. I find when I work with people, parents especially, there are a class of parents, less so now than they used to be, that walk away from faith in their teens or 20s, and then they have a kid, and suddenly they're back in church. Because they realize once they're living for somebody else, they have to take their life a lot more seriously. It's like, oh, I can do whatever I want, but oh no, now that this tiny child relies on me, I got to get my act together. I think it's true for our faith. For whatever reason, we are very cavalier in gambling on our own souls. We're fine having very low religious standards if we think it only affects us. But the second we realize it actually affects our family and our friends and the world, we shape up a little bit. And so I just want to remind you, and I'm going to go through these different stages here in a second, your faith really does affect the souls of the entire world. The eyes of the world are upon you. And if you live your faith strongly, then that light will shine forth like a city on a hill, and souls will be saved. If you phone it in, if you live your faith mildly, if you compromise on a lot of different aspects of your faith, souls will be lost, and possibly forever. So, how are the eyes of the world upon you? Well, internationally, I would say that the U.S. Church continues to be a light in the world. When I meet African priests, I tell them the same thing about their countries. I say, look, you guys are the hope of Christianity in the world. Africa's doing better than anybody else in faith right now. But 2-3 years ago, I met an African priest at a retreat in Ohio, and I was telling him that, and he told me the same thing. He said, oh no, it's America. We look to America. I was like, that was very striking to me. But we are the only rich, developed economy that hasn't completely lost faith. You go to Ireland, as many of you have, the churches are empty, and it's a scandal. You go to places like Germany or the Low Countries, and they struggle to know what it means to be Catholic. They have a lot of debates about whether they're Catholic, and while they're doing that, they're hemorrhaging people from their churches. The United States has managed to remain a faithful country. We're not doing great. We're still hemorrhaging people from faith, but we remain far more Christian than any of our peers or counterparts across the world. And our ability as American Catholics to maintain that faith matters for the entire world. The eyes of the world are upon us, and we are as a city upon a hill. Nationally, nobody is looking to the Archdiocese of Seattle to be an example of faith. Just, they understand where we're at. It's a place of darkness and gloom. Fine. Understood. However, if we can pull off faith in the Archdiocese of Seattle, that level of fidelity in the midst of the most godless place in the United States, by statistics, we are the most godless place in the United States. It's not hyperbole. If we can pull off faith even here, then we will prove the hypothesis that Jesus is more powerful than darkness, that the Lord is the light of the world. The eyes of the nation are upon you as Catholics in the Archdiocese of Seattle, because they want to see your faith. They want to know that it's not just historically Catholic places like Boston and Chicago, or places like Phoenix and Dallas that are growing by leaps and bounds, especially because of immigration from Latin America. They want to know that even amongst the darkness and the rain and the gloom and whatever else, that the faith can flourish. We are here, a city upon a hill in this archdiocese that people are looking to. Locally, I would say in Whatcom County, the eyes of the archdiocese are upon us. You may not realize it, maybe you feel it. Our parish family is a little bit unique in the number of churches that we have. Most of them, 2 and 3 churches that are combined. We have 7. We tie with Grays Harbor County for the most churches that we're trying to have work together. And Grays Harbor, those churches have been combined for 2-3 decades. So we're doing it for the first time and very quickly. Also, we have the Newman Center, so we beat them by half a church. But Father Marco Barbarossa, their pastor, and I have that conversation regularly. In addition, we are also combining the most previously uncombined churches of anybody. We had 4 parishes before July 1, 2024. Now we're trying to do 1. The only other family in the Archdiocese doing that is Assumption St. Bridget, Our Lady of the Lake, and St. Catherine's in North Seattle. Now they beat us because they have 3 schools, but we beat them because we have 7 churches. So there it is. But nonetheless, the eyes of the Archdiocese are upon us because we're trying to do something hard in faith. We are trying to love a lot of neighbors. And we're trying to do so in a way that is somewhat more difficult than many of the other circumstances in the Archdiocese. If we can succeed in taking Partners in the Gospel seriously, if we can succeed in building bridges across 7 communities, if we can succeed in worshiping with each other and loving each other and building programs together and thinking of ourselves as a unified church in this geographical area, then they will have hope. If we can do it, anybody in the Archdiocese can do it. But if we fail, then they will lose hope. I don't want to put the entire Archdiocese of Seattle on your shoulders, but it would be good if we did well here. And if we do well here, it really does affect other people in the Archdiocese. It really does bring them hope. And then finally, I'll mention locally and personally. Gen Z is having a moment that we don't fully understand. But 2-3 years ago, we just started seeing a bunch of Gen Z, especially young men, show up and ask questions in our churches. And our OCIA programs bear that out, and our masses bear that out. But here's the thing. Gen Z, and the millennials somewhat before them, they really prefer to have an interaction with a forum before they have interaction with a person. So a lot of these folks are reading their way into the faith on Reddit or on different forums. They're reading books, and they're reading articles, and they're reading blogs, and they're doing a lot of self-research long before they reach out to a person. When they reach out to a person, or when they show up at a Catholic church without any connections, we have one shot. We have one shot to either be the church they believe us to be, the church that is in union with Christ and the Pope, the church that preserves Christian history, the church that takes faith seriously. We have one shot to be that church. And if they show up and it turns out we are different than the church they read about online, we will lose them. If they talk to a Catholic and that Catholic doesn't take their faith seriously, that Gen Z is going to look somewhere else. Because what they are hungry for is serious religion. Catholics are having a moment, but so are the Orthodox, so are the more traditional Lutherans and Anglicans. They're looking for religion that takes the religious part of the faith seriously. We don't have all that many opportunities. We don't know how long this moment's going to last. You taking your faith seriously really, really matters. And it matters for concrete, individual, specific souls who are looking for something very serious right now. You are, in that sense, a city upon a hill. To bring this to a close, faith matters for your soul. Following Jesus is the most important thing you can ever do. St. Paul tells us in our second reading, he preaches the cross. He's not trying to hide it in fancy words. He just says, that's faith, that's salvation. Jesus on the cross. We do the same. Whether you believe that, whether you follow Jesus on the cross, whether you take your faith seriously, matters far more than just for your individual soul. It does matter for your soul. But the way you live your faith matters for the entire world. We have to be a city upon a hill because there is so much darkness. And people are looking for a light. They're looking around and seeing where can they go to find salvation. We are here because we believe salvation can be found in the Catholic Church through Jesus Christ. That's why we're here. Do we live our lives and our religion powerfully enough that other folks looking for that light would see it in us and the way we follow Jesus?